My name is Curtis Odell. Of course, being on Zoom, this is interesting. I'll be presenting to myself, and because I can't see you, unfortunately, but I am the Assistant Director for Facilities and Operations at Baylor University in Waco, Texas, and I enjoyed presenting this program back in February, March this past year, and so was very disappointed not to be able to go to SWACUHO this past summer, but I am glad I can share this program with you today. So let me make sure. All right, there we go. Zoom presentations are a bit of a new thing for me. So as I mentioned, I'm the Assistant Director for Facilities and Operations. So for our Residence Life Department, I am the point person for facilities. At Baylor, we have Airmark, which is a third-party maintenance provider that do grounds, maintenance, housekeeping, all the facility needs for us. And so I'm the primary liaison with them. But what I want to talk about today is how to better help you become a facilities manager. So just to start us off, so I know the audience a little bit better, if you can use your raise hand button and raise your hand if you are a hall director or you supervise student staff, you're directly frontline with the students in residence halls. And so we've got a couple, Kaylee, Jana, Sarah, Dara, I'm sorry. Okay, a couple of you, great. And then if you are mid-level and you supervise hall directors, do we have any in the crowd? Okay, and then don't see any mid-level. And then if you're a senior level, SHO, more at the top of the org chart. So we got a couple of those, Gregory and Jana. Okay, well, great. Well, when I presented this program, I mean, it's very much catered for the residence hall director and helping them become a better facilities manager on the front line. But I think that the lessons that I'm going to be talking about are really great for supervisors to then take back and train their hall directors. So I really hope that everyone will get something out of this, and you'll be able to take this back to your campus. If we were in Portland, you would literally be taking it back to your campus, but today on Zoom, you are probably already on your campus. So easy commute for you. But I want to start out I've titled my program Shaping Stories, because each of us is shaping a story in one way or another. And so I want you to think about, since we can't or maybe, yeah, actually in the question answer, if you can write, how are you shaping stories as a housing officer? Maybe if a couple of you can make a comment that how that plays out in your career as a housing officer. So I'm sure many of you are thinking about how you impact the student development. You are helping the transition from students into college, from their high school career into their college career. A lot of those type of answers come to the forefront as you are on the front lines interacting with students in your buildings. So now I want you to put on your facilities hat and think about what stories you are shaping from a facilities standpoint, and how does your building play into that story? And so as you think about that, for the most part, you are shaping stories of the student experience. Whether you're building, whether that is good or bad. And over the years of my experience as a facilities manager, I have developed a mission statement. As you can see there on my screen, facilities are the physical representation of our values in residence life. And so thinking about what are your pillars that you try to educate your residents about. I'm sure there'll be things like self-advocacy, scholarship, community. Building your facilities, your residence halls are where those are going to happen. And so a student hopefully is taking care of their space. They're cleaning their rooms, perhaps living on their own for the very first time, reporting problems and work orders. Scholarship, they're going to be studying and having group projects and study sessions. And then community, where they're developing their friendship circles and bonding and working through conflict, as well as developing the good sides of relationships. So all of that happens within our residence halls. And the facilities, again, is that physical representation of our values in residence life. And so bringing this back to myself and making it personal, what is the story that I'm shaping as the assistant director for facilities and operations? And I'm shaping the story of making you a better facilities manager. This is a topic that I'm passionate about because I have seen how facilities can really undermine what we're trying to do in residence life and really enhance what we're trying to do. And if I can impart one thing for you to take away with this from this session, and it's that your building is a member of your team. This is the #1 lesson I want you to take away as you go through this presentation. And if you don't remember anything else, remember that your building is a member of your team. And so whatever your title is, if it's hall director, if it's residence hall director, complex coordinator, if you supervise a building or a couple buildings, then in effect, that is your domain. And as a result, you are the subject matter expert. It's as long as I've been in residence life and as much as I know about buildings and how they run, and having worked with RAs and the student development side, I'm not a subject matter expert in their buildings. I don't know what the students are doing. I don't know their patterns and their needs as intricately as the residence hall director does. And so it's really important that you become a subject matter expert of your building. You know the patterns of your students and the needs. Are they night owls? Do they rise early in the morning? Are they board gamers or video gamers? Do they like gab sessions in the evening? Are they all-nighters? What are those patterns and needs of your students? And those elements really highlight the importance of facilities management and making sure the residence hall can take care of those needs. Besides yourself, there are other stories that factor in to this bigger story of the student experience. And so let's first start by looking at facilities management from the 30,000-foot level. This would be where my story plays in, the upper level, upper leadership, and how they look at the impact of facilities on our students. And so first, we've got the student impact. We think of development in social, emotional, physical, academic. Usually the building is not the center of their life. And when it does become the center of their life, there could be a problem. We want the building to be a foundation where everything is built upon. But if they get bogged down in the problems or the deficiencies of the building, then they're not going to be paying attention to what's happening up above. The success of the community is a critical factor in student satisfaction. Your building has a huge impact on each of these areas. When the building is falling apart and limping along, your residents are going to experience the same. And then finally, we do have to look at the bottom line. Most of us, when we got into residence life, we were really focused on the student development and trying to be educators, but ultimately we do have to pay the bills. And so how do facilities impact the bottom line? From a recruitment standpoint, if all things being equal, it's only natural that a prospective student is going to choose the school with the better residence halls. And then the next would be, once you have them in your buildings, is retention. A building falling apart or repetitive facilities issues can really impact whether a student wants to stay at your school. And then finally, our ultimate goal is to try to get them across that finish line, get that piece of paper, and graduate and make them contributing citizens of our society. And so, how, you know, how this bottom line, how is it impacted, and what's that look like from a financial standpoint? And so, one of the things I always I do this presentation for hall directors as well as the student staff. And I like to show examples of two different types of rooms that we have here at Baylor. And the first one being a suite style room. So our suites are about $4,000 a semester. We have CLs, which are community leaders, the same as RAs on most campuses. And let's say an RA has 40 residents, and for 2 semesters, that would represent a financial burden of 300, or I guess revenue, not burden so much, but gain of $320,000. So I always like to show this to RAs because their eyes get pretty big when I show them that figure. And then looking at a building as a whole, let's say there's 5 CLs, that would equal $1.6 million. All right, that's nothing to sneeze at. That's a pretty good amount of money that a residence hall director could be over for this given building. This residence hall director would actually be in charge of 2 kind of brother-sister communities. And so think of it as $3.2 million that hall director is responsible for. An example at University of Houston, since I was presenting this in Texas, and then an example for Texas A&M University. And so you could do this math at your university based on your layout. Another type of room that is common here at Baylor is a community bathroom. And so about $35.75 for that room, little smaller ratio because these are our freshman halls, 32 residents over 2 semesters. These RAs would be over about $229,000. This particular buildings are our largest on campus with 17 RAs. And so that hall director's overseeing about $3.9 million. And so this isn't to scare our RAs or our hall directors, but just to give them a little perspective of what the students represent from a monetary value. It's not, again, our priorities are all those things those values I mentioned earlier, like scholarship and self-advocacy, community, things of that nature. But we don't want to neglect how the facilities play a part in the success of a student from a monetary standpoint. So this is how it offers, just to give you a perspective on how it plays into the bigger picture. So now that we've looked at it kind of from the 30,000 foot level, let's bring it down to the operational level and how this impacts and more closely connects you on a day-to-day basis. And so ask yourself, how are hall directors impacted by their building? The building is often where you live. It's definitely where you work, and it's where all of your students and your student staff go about their day-to-day lives. And so for both, from a student perspective and from a parent's perception, perception often becomes reality. And I'm sure you've had your share of phone calls related to this, as well as some eye rolls when things start getting a little exaggerated. But from a student perception, the image of the hall, good or bad, will be how they perceive the hall. And so they often treat the hall how they perceive it. So if it's run down, they're going to continue to run it down. If it is well kept and in nice condition with nice amenities, hopefully they will take better care of it also. From a parent's perspective, if the building is taken care of, then they're going to have this feeling that their student will be taken care of. I'm sure all of you have heard of Maslow's hierarchy, and when the bottom level needs are not met, so your food, water, shelter, when those are not met, the student development aspects up the pyramid are not going to be of any interest to the students. And so from a student issues standpoint, we need, again, like I mentioned, that foundation. We need to make sure that foundation's intact so that we can build upon that. I have unfortunately learned this firsthand. When I lived in South Texas, I oversaw an apartment complex of 600 apartments, about 1,500 students. And one of our phases, it had 200 apartments, about 500 students. The boiler that supplied hot water to the entire phase broke. Now, this was at the end of August, right after move-in. And even though South Texas is plenty hot in August and early September, nobody wants to take a shower, a cold shower for any extended period of time. And in that particular instant, the boiler was down for an entire month. So imagine taking cold showers for an entire month. And you can imagine what the reaction of our students were. We had highly motivated staff. I had a really great hall director over that phase. But no matter how much effort, no matter how much time and energy they put into connecting with the residents, doing great programming, the students just were not interested. Their basic needs had not been met for a full month. And so all that other stuff that we tried to promote in residence life was of no interest to them. And then the last thing is curb appeal. And of course, that touches back to all those things being equal. What is a student going to like? They're gonna like the halls with nice grounds, with well kept landscaping, and want to go to a school that's kept nice. And so the other aspect for a residence hall director is that facilities can be a foreign language. I'm sure many of you have gone to grad school, have gotten a master's in some kind of field related to residence life, but I would almost guarantee that none of you had received a degree in facilities management. In graduate school, you're being taught higher ed theory and other aspects like that. You're not being taught about chillers and air conditioning systems and things of that nature. And so it's important that you make an effort to begin to learn those things. If you've ever done any travel to other countries that speak a different language, it's easy to feel confused and lost because you don't speak the language. They're speaking a different language from you. And in the same way can be true with facilities and facilities management. And so it's important to work on learning that language so that you feel more comfortable with it. So as I mentioned, the first lesson, your building is on your team. And the success of your community is really going to depend on that teamwork and all the members of your team pulling their weight and doing well. I'm sure all of you have been on a team before where a team member just didn't pull their weight, whether that was a soccer team and a bad defender or a group project, and they dropped the ball in giving their portion of the project and you had to pick up the slack. The same is true with your building. When your building is not pulling its weight, everyone is going to feel it. And so it's important to educate your student staff on this. They need to know what is urgent and what's not, when to call in an issue and when to escalate. It's important to develop that trust with them because you are the boots on the ground and they're your boots on the ground. And one thing I always teach my hall directors is that, don't cry wolf when there is no wolf. But if you're saying, hey, we've got this big problem there, there's a figurative fire going on in our building, I'm going to trust that because they are the ones on the ground and they understand the heat of a situation and what's going on. And sometimes, this could be the last straw for a student. It may feel like a small thing, but 10 small things can really add up to being a big thing. It's important to build your relationships with your service staff. Your housekeepers and your maintenance workers, they have really unique perspectives of working on the floors and seeing what goes on with your staff. There's been times where our housekeeping staff have really identified urgent health-related problems with students who were in the bathroom unusually long time, and they reported that, and we were able to get help for that student. Or you know, when they find an exorbitant number of beer bottles in the trash can, they can report that to the hall staff for the hall staff to be able to respond appropriately, or at least have that on their radar. So developing that relationship is really important. And you want them to understand that you care about the building. They're not just working for you, they're working with you, and you care about the job that they do. It's important to use the established systems, whether, you know, if you have an online work order system or some other way of reporting issues, learn those systems and work within them as much as possible, but understand when you need to deviate. If this problem has been going on for a while, or, you know, it's something urgent like a leak, then you may need to make a phone call rather than just relying on the normal system. Another partner, another piece of our play, of our story, is the maintenance perspective. You know, they speak a different language, as I mentioned, and it's important for you to try your best to learn that language, because it'll be easier to communicate with them. And when you do speak their language, they get excited. They want to continue to develop that communication and that partnership with them. You develop trust and understanding when you begin to speak that same language. But it's also important to understand where responsibilities lies. Here at Baylor, if we have a problem with Wi-Fi and a student submits a work order to the maintenance department, it's going to get rejected. It's not going to go anywhere, because you know, Wi-Fi is managed by our ITS department on campus. And that the service area of staff also plays into that we have zone techs that are kind of our generalist workers, and they provide maintenance for, you know, 2 or 3 buildings. And so if you don't see your zone tech for a day or two, it's not that they are not there, it's that they could be working in another building. And so that can influence kind of that transparency and how you work together. And then depending on how your kind of your service agreement is set up on campus, you may have in-house maintenance workers, or you may contract with a third party like we do with Airmark, or even with your physical plant on campus. There's probably going to be a scope of service, a scope of service by that provider that establishes what's within the norm of work, and then what is outside that. That usually doesn't play into the residence hall director's lives. That's usually more in my wheelhouse. But them understanding that is an element that, you know, they might make a request and I might have to say no because of the cost associated with it. And then finally, don't be shy about asking questions. You know, the only bad question is the one not asked. So hopefully at the end of this, you'll have a question or two for me. But most of the time, your maintenance workers, housekeepers, they love to talk about their work. They care about the work they're doing in their buildings, and they want to talk about it. As I mentioned, that your building is a member of your team, just like with your RRAs, it's important to know what their limitations are. You know, a building that was built last year is going to operate very differently than a build that was built in the 50s. So what is the age of your building? What type of air conditioning units do you have, and the age of them? Has it been renovated in the last 40 years? What kind of noises does it make through the day and night as the building is expanding and contracting? And so it's important to have this open communication with your service providers so that they know what you expect of them. Do you expect them to check in with you on a daily or weekly basis? Should they update you on certain issues that they're encountering? If there's delays in service because a part is on order, Do you want them to update you so that you're aware of what's going on? Do you want to do a weekly walk with them, which I would definitely recommend, because you can point out issues to them and they can, one, educate you on stuff, as well as see things firsthand that you're concerned about. And all this comes down to is customer service, and how are we caring for our customer, the residents, to make sure that they're being well cared for. Because the thing that's important to remember is that other than, perhaps they're a single building in their major, the residence hall is where students spend the most time. A lot of that is sleeping, of course, but just like your house, you become an expert in your house, and so they're going to be an expert in their living space. And so understanding that, knowing that that is going to influence how the students operate is important. So far I've set the stage, I've laid out the scene, and identified the major actors in this story. So now let's talk about how you make it happen. Here are some tips and advice to make you a better facilities manager. And as I said, right after understanding that the building is a member of your team, you have to make it a priority. I'm sure that all of you have scheduled one-on-ones with your RA staff, and you should do the same with your building. You cannot be an expert in your building if you don't know your building. And so that requires spending time with it. It means putting on your facilities hat on a weekly basis and walking your building, looking in the corners, looking up, looking down, looking at the lights, looking for stained ceiling tiles that could be indicative of a leak, looking in the corners for cobwebs. Is housekeeping getting in those hard to reach areas? And what about stairwells in the back of the building that very few people observe? Is it full of trash and other debris? And so making sure, spending time and making that a priority to do your walk. And honestly, it's better for you to see it than your supervisor to see it. It's easy to develop flyer blindness. I'm sure there's been times in your life where you were embarrassed because you're walking a hall in late October and there's a flyer on a bulletin board from move-in. And that happens to the best of us, even those with the best of intentions, is we just get used to our environment and things kind of fade into the background. And so it really takes intentionality for you to make this a priority. And so stay connected to your residents. As I mentioned, they spend a lot of time here. They are up here late hours, possibly when you're not, and they're going to become experts in their building. So they are a great source of information. And it's really better to hear from them than from getting a phone call from a parent or from a president's office. So really, emphasizing that flow of communication from them to you and to their RA staff. And then you have to stay on top of these things. And so as that's creating lists, if it's establishing spreadsheets or reviewing existing management tools like StarRes, then you want to do that. So a lot of this creates a lot of demand. How do you manage the demand? First, learning the lingo will give you more confidence that you know what you're talking about. If you're having to say, hey, that doohickey over there is broken, not a lot of confidence in you as a facilities manager. If you know the names of things and how they operate and work, you don't have to be an expert in the ins and outs of what a chiller does, but if you know how a chill water system works, it's taking the cold water to the air conditioner and back to the chiller, having a basic familiarity with that will help you along the way. And being familiar with your building, not just inside, but also outside. Where are the parking lots that your students are using? What's the grounds and the landscaping looking like? Becoming an expert inside and out. When I was, and walking your building on a weekly basis and having fresh eyes. It requires you to be intentional about doing that and having your head on a swivel so that you're looking for issues. It's really easy just to walk from your apartment to your office and really not pay attention to the furniture. Is it getting a little grungy? Are there flyers that are old? Cobwebs in the corners and damaged ceiling tiles. Keep your eyes up, down, looking left to right. Before I got into housing, I was a HVAC engineer. I designed air conditioning systems for buildings. And to this day, I mean, it's been nearly 20 years since I did that. To this day, when I walk into a room, I always look up. I look at the lighting, what type of ceiling tiles there are, where the air conditioner diffusers and registers are. And it was a habit I developed back when I was an engineer. And to this day, I continue to do that. And so you want to develop those habits that you're always on the lookout for issues in your building. How do you do this? You can't do it alone. You're not everywhere all the time, but you have student staffs that work for you. And so you want to empower them to do the same. You want to impart these lessons on them so that they are paying attention to these things and reporting them and not just letting them kind of fade by the wayside. Record keeping is important, and a photo speaks 1,000 words. When a hall director has to bring up issues to me, I try to ask for a photo, and not just one, but two. One zoomed in on the problem, and then one wider to give me more context of the situation. And then standardizing your building. You know, is all the furniture in the residence rooms the same? That really helps if an RA walks into a room and knows there should be a bed, a desk, a chair, and a dresser. And they can do a quick scan. And if they see all four of those things, they know that all the furniture's there. When they only count to 3, they then realize, hey, a chair's missing or a dresser's been taken out, and they can ask more questions. And then communicating with your residents about facilities. You know, they see the problems. They're not unfamiliar with them. There's no point in hiding it. Likelihood is they're going to snap a picture and put it on Instagram. And so if you can emphasize the importance of facilities, of how they can report problems, continue to keep those lines of communication open, then perhaps they'll be a part of the solution rather than just putting the picture on Instagram and complaining about it, which generally means they didn't report it, and so then it's not going to get fixed. So the element of knowing your building is also knowing some of the details, like what is the square footage of rooms? Are all the rooms the same? Is there one room that's maybe a little bit smaller so that on move-in day you can expect there might be a little problem with how a student feels about their smaller room, and be prepared and to anticipate that. How many residents in the building? How many rooms, beds? How many doors onto the hallways for putting up flyers? Are there expanded occupancy options for converting lounges into bed space? What's the cost of one bed? I mentioned earlier, you can do the math to see what's the value of your building from a monetary aspect for your university. And then what are the most common facilities complaints? Does it take a really long time for the showers to warm up? Is it the air conditioning not kick on at certain times? Are there always lights out? What is your problem for your building? And then helping to understand what those limitations are. Can you overcome them? Can you report them? Being an advocate for your building. Your job is to be a squeaky wheel. As a hall director, you're the only one that's spending 100% of his or her time in the building. I'm over 15 buildings, and so I don't spend a lot of time in any one building. And so you have to be a squeaky wheel to make sure it stays on the radar of those that can help you out to get an issue resolved. And then communication, as I mentioned, housekeeping and maintenance, having those communication pattern open. They're going to know what the extent and severity of a problem is. And so ask good questions. How urgent is this? What's the timeline for it getting fixed? How is it going to impact our residents? So I try to, when I get an email that says we have a hot water line that is leaking, we need to shut off hot water to the building to make this repair. I always 3 questions. How long is the hot water going to be off? What's impacted by it? And will the cold water remain on? And maybe it's just 2 questions. So, but I want to know how this is going to impact the students. So if they can give me that information up front, that just saves a lot of back and forth emails. And so I want to make sure that, if you're shutting off the hot water, will the students still be able to use the toilets, which is just cold water? And then ask more questions. Don't be shy about that. Ask anyone you can. Maintenance workers like to talk about things, and so they'll be happy to explain how things work. Knowing the top 5 things about your building, how the sprinklers are set up. Do students hang things on their sprinklers? Is there asbestos in your building? The age of it, things like that. Knowing kind of some of those basic details of your building so that you're better prepared as a facilities manager. So I hope you enjoy hearing the story that I'm shaping. I want you to be better facilities managers. The most important thing I can impress upon you is that your building is a member of your team. I can teach you general facilities skills, but you won't be a good facilities manager until you spend time in your building focusing on facilities. And so here we're going into, almost into December. I hope you'll take a little bit of time. Maybe you'll get some downtime, that the students will move out. Spend some time walking your building and talking with your facilities staff and seeing maybe there's some TLC that's needed here or there, and you can get some things improved. So I hope you'll have a new perspective to the stories that you're shaping as a facilities manager. And so thank you for your time. I appreciate you logging in and hearing a little bit more about facilities management. I hope that you'll have a question or two, and that's all I've got.
All right, thanks, Curtis. Let's give folks a couple minutes to maybe think of some questions and type them in. But in the meantime, I had one.
All right.
I like that idea of learning the lingo. I mean, I think that'd be useful for lots of things. Do you have any resources, like links or anything? Like, there's a good way to learn that?
I don't, unfortunately. Usually I find it's more effective to just spend some time with your kind of your generalist, whoever your maintenance worker is, and let them talk to you. And again, you don't have to get so detailed. Like, a plug is actually called a receptacle in engineering terms, but a plug is the kind of the normal way of referencing it. A light cover is called a lens, but a light cover will suffice. And so knowing kind of the general jargon, but we definitely want to avoid doohickeys and thingamabobs, as Ariel has 20 of those. Hopefully you get that reference. But spending some time with your maintenance workers, they can explain some stuff. There's a lot of things online. I don't have any specific thing that I can just that's kind of all encompassing.
Right. No, that's great. Thank you.
My pleasure.
And I'm not seeing any other questions.
Oh, no questions.
So, but that's okay. Folks may have some later, or they may go back and, we're recording it, so they may go back and reference the video and think of some later. So possibly they could contact you with any questions. But I do really appreciate this so much. And thank you for spending the time to share your best of program with us. Like you said, again, we wish we were in person doing this, but there will be a time and a place for that. Hopefully in the future sometime soon. So
sure.
appreciate
thank you. Thank you so
yes.
much. I appreciate all you guys, and good luck wrapping up your semester.